Hi Lebby, welcome back to Vive Fitness. Thank you for coming down after your Atlantic row. How are you feeling?
No problem. Good, yeah. It's taken a while. I think the hardest bit is the week in Antigua after we arrived. It's kind of, you feel terrible when you get off the boat. Worse than you do on the boat. It's about 48 hours where you kind of, your brain is wobbling and everything is tightening up. And then you kind of gradually have to get used to being back on land. Okay,
is that the euphoria back down to the reality in the body?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of time to realise that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of, the real stiffness kind of tends to go after about 48 hours. And then you've got the feeling like you get your land legs takes about 6 days. And then there are longer issues. So parts of your body just completely waste away when you're on the boat. So your calves go, your glutes go, your hands turn into claws because you've been gripping the oar for such a long time. And that's the problem that lasts for longer. So that's the problem that I've still got, that the hands are still quite stiff.
So I think we've gone straight into the reality of the aftermath. If we were to track you back a little bit, what would you say pre-racing actually inspired you to do this journey in the first place?
Well, so I was quite lucky in that I got some last-minute invitations to join the crew. So it's a friend of mine that I rode with 30 years ago at Oxford in the women's boat race. And they had a crew of 4 mums, and one of the women dropped out due to injury. So I'd already written an article about them for the newspaper and given them some help on various things. So I was a little bit involved in the crew, but I wasn't really expecting to be invited along.
Because I would be invited and probably politely declined. What really inspired from within to row the Atlantic Ocean?
And it's funny, I was sitting outside drinking a bottle of wine with my husband when my friend called. And I think really, I was a little bit uncertain. I was most worried that I would be seasick, or kind of when the journey finished that I would be really land sick.
That was the only worry about the Atlantic Ocean.
That was my biggest worry, but there were kind of other fears. But the core thing is that I knew if I turned it down that I would regret it for the rest of my life.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So you feel then it's just that sense of achievement that it had to be done.
Yeah, and I knew that if my friend came back and they'd had this incredible time and I'd let my fears stop me going, then I wouldn't forgive myself.
Were there any pre-race fears, or did you just quash that and focus on what needed to be done?
No, there were pre-race fears. I think that there are times when you're forced to confront your fears. So you have to do various courses before you go, so sea survival and first aid and stuff like that. So for sea survival, you are jumping in a swimming pool with your safety suit on and trying to get in the life raft and being dragged in the life raft. And
they make it realistic and pitch black and temper waves, or is it just a nice calm pool?
No, well, quite calm, but it is quite chaotic still, because you're with these kind of big burly blokes and everyone's sort of pulling each other on, and that is quite terrifying. And then in the course, they kind of show you the occasion. So my worst fear was that we would capsize and that the boat wouldn't self-right, which they are supposed to roll. But there is this kind of famous photo of a boat, an ocean rowing boat, upside down on the ocean, taken from the life raft, with the tanker in the background of them coming to pick them up.
Well, it was not your boat, that's
not our boat, no. But that was the kind of big worry. And in fact, one crew out of 36 capsized this year, so it does.
Okay, good.
But they did self-right.
Good to hear. So on the training side, we know about the safety side you mentioned. Now on the training side, what was your approach to training? So you got the rowing, the physical side. How did you go about that?
Well, so I was already rowing as a veteran rower, so masters rowing. So after the lockdown last year, I'd started training and I'd done some sprinting, masters rowing, but in the summer it's 1,000-metre sprints. Okay. So I was quite fit. Cardiovascular was quite good, and I'd done some marathons and things like that, but my strength training was not great. So I'd really left the strength training to one side. So
that leads me to, how did we help you here at Vive with the EMS training? How did you feel you benefited? Given that obviously we're short, sharp 20-minute sessions, but you were out there for about the best part of 40 days.
Yeah, for me it was brilliant because I really had a limited time to improve my strength. And strength it was one of the things that's really, really key on the boat. So cardiovascular fitness is important, but actually, in terms of your effort, it sounds kind of slightly odd, but you're rowing 12 hours a day, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. but you're never actually really getting out of breath. But obviously your strength is incredibly important because you're moving this massive ocean rowing boat along, and you've got really different conditions. You've got conditions that strike on one side and the other. So it's really important that everything's toned, that your balance is really good. And EMS training was brilliant for that. And, it was short, sharp shock treatment for me. So those 20-minute sessions were brilliant. I didn't really have the time to spend hours in the gym building my strength up.
So you felt strength and balance generally from
Yeah.
Great, that's cool.
Amazing.
Okay, very good. And then moving on to the race itself. So you've done all the safety check, you've done all the physical side, and you're ready to go. How was it on that initial day, walking down to the boat, getting ready to set off?
It was amazing, actually. The race start was just incredible, and we'd had a fairly torrid 2 weeks in the run-up. So somebody in the crew had got COVID. We'd had to have something mended on our boat, which meant that we were the last boat in the water, bar a couple of other ones that got sort of stuck in customs. But we were the last 4 on the water, and so it wasn't the ideal preparation. And then the day before, I'd almost broken an oar when we were out in this really heavy seas. So it was a bit, we were a little bit sort of nervous beforehand, but that adrenaline at the start, you've got all the boats around you, and it's just the most bizarre feeling to know that when you row out of Lebby Eyres harbour that you're, and row away from land, that you're not going to see land for another 40 plus days. And not going to see anyone else apart from your crewmates, and but it was incredible, and the adrenaline of that moment lasts you for a good few days actually.
So on the adrenaline rush you got, how was it at night though when it's suddenly time to have your first 2-hour generous sleep?
I actually don't remember the first night that much. I think we did for the first 2 days we did. We rowed 3 of us up, and so we had hardly any rest during the day, just 30 minutes. So an hour and a half rowing and 30 minutes off, and then in the evening, I think we just sort of fell asleep for those 90 minutes. But the second night, I really distinctly remember when the sun went down and the sea was a little bit choppy and just feeling kind of quite apprehensive. And that was the first, sort of the only time really that I kind of felt particularly scared. And after that, you sort of start to settle into the routine. But the worst bit, definitely, of the whole row is getting up when the alarm goes at the end of your sleep at 10 to the hour, and you have to get up, you have to put all your clothes on again, and you have to go out and sit on the oars again for another 2 hours. It's those 10 minutes. Being on the oars is all right, but those 10 minutes are tricky.
And were there any other what am I doing moments, or why am I doing this moments?
Oh, we had some quite terrifying moments in the first week. So there was one evening where, first of all, we had a sort of yacht that wouldn't respond to us, and we kept getting collision alarms. So you have a system that tells you when there's a boat near you, and the closest, it was 30 seconds to collision. And you have flares on the boat, and you never expect to use them in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But we did on that night 3, get out this flare and try and alert this boat, and it didn't see us. But in the end, we just kind of went past with a few meters to spare. And then a few hours later, saw another boat bearing down on us, which ended up being we managed to get them on the radio. It was a Spanish Navy warship kind of moving silently around the ocean. That was the sort of nearest thing that we had in terms of collisions. But we actually had quite calm conditions for 10 days, but then when the wind started, that was scary. And there was one particularly terrifying night where the waves were massive. We had some 20-foot waves.
Is there any visibility or?
No visibility, no moon. So the moon had been there for the first 10 days. I have to understand the kind of passage of the moon, but for a period in the middle of the road, we were pitch black all night. And it is terrifying because you can't see anything, you can't see the waves about to hit you, and you just suddenly get huge breakers over the boat that just soak you, and they knock you off your seat, and you're actually rolled off your seat. But there was only one night. You have life jackets on board. There was only one night that we said to ourselves, let's put the life jackets on. Okay. And I think the next evening we felt apprehensive, but I don't think there was any real moment where I thought, I don't want to be here. Which is great because we had a brilliant time. We all settled into boat life really well, and
how was the day-to-day boat life in general? I mean, there's a few questions that people have been asking.
Yeah.
So how did you do certain activities each day, or more cleaner ones? How do you have your food, or what food do you have? How was the day-to-day?
Yeah, so the question that everyone asks, obviously, is how do you go to the loo? And it is, so basically the ocean rowing boat has 2 cabins at either end, 3 seats, but most of the time it's 2 of us rowing. And then that other third seat is where you keep the buckets that you go to the loo in. It's where you do the cooking. It's where you do your washing. And so kind of all of the activity of the boat sort of goes on in this little space. So basically, you go to the loo on the bucket, or actually in a jug, if you just wanted to do a wee in a jug, chuck it over the side, you wash the bucket out, chuck that over the side. So you're using seawater to kind of clean everything. But in terms, for some people it is a real issue. For us, we just didn't really have a problem with it. No one felt particularly modest, and you just get on with it. And you get used to it. In terms of food, we have dehydrated food. So you have a water maker on board that brings in the seawater. You run it for about half an hour every day, and it makes litres of fresh water for you. And then you use a jet boil, which is kind of very fast boiling instrument, that's of gas, and that boils up the water, which we keep in thermos flasks. And then we'd use that to hydrate the dehydrated food, which is like spag bowl and rice and beans.
Do you get used to it, or does it actually taste good?
Some of it tastes good. I had a real problem because I completely lost my appetite. So we took seasickness meds for the first few days, and they give you a very dry mouth. And so eating anything is like doing the cream cracker challenge. Your mouth gets really dry. And so I couldn't, we'd have these huge snack packs, biscuits and high calorie snacks, and I couldn't really eat any of it apart from Kendal mint cake, which was the sort of Kendal mint cake, minstrels and bounties were my kind of saviour. I still lost a lot of weight, one of the largest amounts of weight of anyone in the fleet, I think.
Okay, how much weight did you lose?
I was 76 kilograms. 76.6 or something when we set out, and getting on the scales on arrival in Antigua, I was 58.9.
Okay, very significant weight loss.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a second. During the event and further into the event, did you have any other scary moments with maybe marine life, or any beautiful moments with marine life?
Yeah, we didn't see any. The real issue, or the real worry, everyone says, do you see a shark? But actually the real predator out there for an ocean rowing boat is a blue marlin, and they have big spikes. And last year 4 boats got attacked by blue marlins. And so the spikes come up through the bottom of the boat, which when you're sleeping basically on the bottom of the boat is a worry. But this year only one boat did get attacked by a blue marlin, and after that we were a little bit nervous, and we cleaned the bottom of the boat. So you had to actually get in the ocean, get in the water and rub the bottom of the boat with sponge to clean it up so that you don't have fish feeding alongside. So it's those fish that the blue marlins are trying to attack.
Right, got it.
Yeah.
Were there any other encounters? I think flying fish?
Yeah, the flying fish. So we had tiny flying fish for the first 10 days or so, and then on Christmas Eve, we were just rowing along, and this first massive flying fish just flew out of the ocean, hit my friend on the back, and then just landed in the gunnels. And then they do this sort of horrible sort of death throes. They're kind of shaking, and then they stop, and then they shake. And it was really eerie and really weird when it first happened, particularly on Christmas Eve. Which everything went wrong on Christmas Eve, and we got used to it. So one of my crewmates absolutely hated them, and they would always land in her lap, or hit her in the face. And as soon as they come in the boat, you smell them. There's this incredibly strong smell, and when they're flapping around, they kind of spray you with all this kind of fishy.
You almost get tuned to the dangers around you the longer you're out there.
Yeah. But with some amazing, we had a huge pod of dolphins that went past, about like 200 dolphins, something like that. And it took about 20 minutes for them to pass us. And it was just, they were all playing and leaping out of the water. And, that was, I think, the most incredible moment nature-wise, as well as the sunsets, the sunrises, and just the most beautiful starry skies. Especially when it was pitch black, that was the benefit of it being pitch black, because you could just see this in the Milky Way, and just amazing, really.
You described all the problems you had post-race, but it sounds like you've had some amazing memories to take away from the actual race as well.
Yeah.
Which is great. Did you get on all well with the team throughout the whole experience? I imagine a lot of people think 40 days with the same people is quite a challenge.
Yeah, and before we left, actually, so many people said to us, try not to fall out with each other, because I think the race last year, there were quite a lot of fallouts. and it was quite difficult. And so it was a kind of big thing that we talked about among ourselves before we left. You know, how, and our motto was actually stay safe, stay strong, and stay friends. Having said that, I did have a couple of big rows on the boat, but I think they were all, I mean, when you look back, it's all about rowing things. It's about what to do on the boat, and I think it's inevitable when you're in a highly stressed situation, you're sleep deprived. You know, you're trying to deal with this fact that you've got 3,000 miles to row or 2,000 miles to row, which is such an enormous amount, and you're doing 50, 60, 70, 80 miles a day, which seems so tiny in comparison, you know, that you can't really kind of control it. And so that stress is always kind of there in the background. You know, and you need to go the fastest you possibly can. And those kind of tensions can sort of tell a bit on the boat. And, you know, our first round was on Christmas Eve, everyone was exhausted, we were really emotional because we were all missing our kids.
Did you get to speak to your family, or were you completely isolated when you're out there?
No, it's kind of really kind of up to you actually, how much you keep in contact with people on land. So the most basic form of communication you have is satellite phones, and you can talk to people. Can't call you because it's incredibly expensive, but you can call them. And then you have a kind of email system that's slightly difficult to use, but you can email. And then there's also a kind of broadband system where you hold up this box to the satellite. And we didn't have that much luck with it, but some people do use it all the time. And then you can send videos, and you can be on WhatsApp, you could be on your normal email. But I don't think we didn't want that. We did use it very occasionally to send out
stay in the moment.
Because otherwise it would be too much like normal life. You know,
Sure.
You know, and a few years ago, people doing the crossing wouldn't even have had that. You know, they would have had the satellite phones, you know, and not much else. You know, and
a few flares just in case.
Yeah, and you want to be able to kind of cut off from, you know, real life, I think. And nowadays everyone has a weather router as well, so someone who's sort of telling you where to go, and then.
So you felt a bit safer having that.
Yeah, but I think, you know, that's one of the big changes. So, you know, previously people were a bit more kind of, you know, it was a bit more wild, and.
So you kept it as authentic as you could.
Yeah.
And then I think everyone would be curious to know the sense of achievement you got from it and what you did actually achieve. So when you came in, how many days did it take, and why was it so special for your team in particular?
Well, we were actually involved in a kind of race with the other female four who were younger than us, and they'd been ahead for 2 weeks, then we'd been ahead for 3 weeks, and then they overtook us in the final week. And that was quite hard in some ways because we'd worked so hard to try and beat them, and then we had to accept that we weren't going to. But actually, in the euphoria, the amazing kind of feeling of coming into Antigua on the Friday night at sundown, all our kids waiting for us, I think that when you're out there, you kind of need the thrill of the race to get you going. When you arrive in Antigua, you realise that the achievement is having crossed the Atlantic. You've done this amazing thing, and we did it incredibly fast. Our skipper's husband had done it 2 years ago with a boat called the Felix 5, and the five blokes, army guys, most of them, and they'd done it in 41 days, 11 hours, something like that. And we did it in 40 days, 11 hours and 25 minutes. So one of our aims had been to beat their time.
So well done, you achieved that. I'm sure they were really pleased about that. They're going to do next year's race to get revenge.
Well, I think, well, certainly the skipper's husband is, I think he might like head out in a solo boat to try and beat us. But, you know, so that was a real kind of personal kind of challenge. And then just as middle-aged women, we really performed incredibly well. We held our own with the male crews. It was an incredibly competitive year with a lot of people racing. So in that time, 40 days, in other years would have put us in the top 5, for instance. I mean, it's difficult to compare sometimes the speed between the years because there's wind changes and things like that. But we actually had a quite slow year.
So where did you place out of how many crews in the end?
We were 13th out of 36 crews.
Again, it's another great achievement. And you particularly had another achievement in the sense of your age.
Yeah, I did. So I was the first 50-year-old across the line.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, so that was very by an hour.
And there are many people over 50 in the history of the event that have actually achieved this?
There are quite a few. it is quite a democratic sport, and that's one of the things that's really amazing about it. You know, this extreme endurance means that it's not necessarily always the kind of youngest, fittest people that win, you know, and that if being a little bit older with a little bit of kind of nous can count for quite a lot.
I mean, that mental age rather than just the physical.
Yeah. And I think the oldest woman who's done it is 64. But we think that we were the second oldest female ever to do it, unassisted.
And the quickest, I get the impression.
Yeah. I know there's no actual kind of record keeping for mum crews, but that oldest female did it in 67 days, and we did it in 40. So there is a big difference.
Don't need to comment on that. It says everything you need to know. So well done. And then you mentioned briefly crossing the line. Is that another kind of standout moment? I've seen the pictures and it looked quite euphoric.
Yeah,
Crossing
the line was amazing. That was so amazing that we didn't actually realise we'd crossed the line. We kept on going. We totally missed. I think we missed the horn, we missed the flare, and then eventually you have a media boat next to you, and these guys are screaming at you as you turn into the harbour, because it's quite hard to turn in. You know, it's quite a small entrance into English Harbour, and so they're telling you what to do, and they're like, "You've crossed the line, you've done it," you know. And then so we finish, and then you get your flares out, and you light your flares, and that is the most amazing moment.
So was it night time?
Yeah, we just had the perfect time, because we had the sun down, so we had the sun on the cliffs, you know, sun setting on the cliffs of Antigua as we rode past, and as we turned into English Harbour, it was quite dark, so all the lights of the yachts were lit up, these massive super yachts. It was like Christmas. And then you came in, and then we did the flares, which then look great in the photographs as well. And then you kind of rode right into Nelson's Dockyard, which is this incredibly historic place. Rode past a restaurant where they put on "We Are the Champions," and all the kind of diners coming out and clapping. And your kids are up on this kind of fort, and all the families, they're sort of cheering you in. And as you row into Nelson's Dockyard, they come down, and you have photos, and they kind of chat to you. But that first moment, when you step on land after 40 days, you know, your legs wobble, and you feel so weird. Nothing can prepare you for how you're going to feel when, like, not being able to stand up hardly. And
then after that amazing moment when you come in, how were the after days? You speak to sportsmen sometimes, achieving it's great, but then the aftermath is an interesting mental experience, and also in your case, for 40 days at sea, a physical experience.
Yeah, it is difficult, the aftermath, and obviously post-adventure blues is quite a common thing. Especially for a race like this, which, I mean, I had 6 months of involvement before we actually left, but some people have been planning to do it for 2 years, you know, and then that can leave an incredible hole in your life. And the real tears came for me the moment the plane landed back in London, and then I started crying, and that is difficult. It's just sort of difficult, but also lovely. I mean, that first night back in my bed under my duvet was the best feeling. I just felt like I hadn't been kind of comfy for about 2 months.
And how was sleep the first few nights after the race? Was it you fall back into a rhythm, or is it a little bit off to start with?
No, sleep is really, really hard to begin with. And some people, it really depends, and they tell you actually before you come in. Some people will just get in the bed and sleep for 12 hours. Other people won't be able to sleep. They'll get up and they'll sleep on the floor, and that was me. So I couldn't sleep. I was really restless. I had to sleep on the floor, I had to do Pilates in the middle of the night, I had to eat in the middle of the night, so your body's so used to eating every 2 hours that you really need to drink and eat the tiny amounts in order to just kind of get your energy and your spirits back.
You've effectively slept in a slightly aggressive rocking chair for 40 days. Is there any kind of motion sickness or motion adjustment when you come back as well?
Yeah, everything wobbles. We were at the hotel we were in an Airbnb for the first few nights, and it was up some stairs. It was sort of an octagonal building, and I just felt like it was on stilts. It was just in the water. The whole thing was rocking, and I was with my family, this is really weird, And then eventually, after about 5 days, that sort of rocking feeling goes. But on New Year's Eve, we did make some resolutions for ourselves. And I think when I come back, I try and when I've come back, I've tried to counter those post-adventure blues by thinking about my boat resolutions. And I think when you've done an achievement like this, you really want to make it count.
Yeah.
And you want to make it count for the rest of your life, I think. And there is sort of, everyone talks about it being an incredibly life-changing thing. And that maybe you won't change your job, or, some people do, some people don't. But I think it definitely changes your attitude.
Any key examples of how you see things differently now? Or?
Yeah, I think that I'd really try not to sweat the small stuff, and it's that kind of thing that people always say to you, and it's a real cliche. But you just have to say, sometimes you just have to be really firm with yourself. If you're getting stressed about these little things, just no, I rode an ocean, I put up with this, I put up with these incredible things, and I'm not going to let this upset me.
Gives you a better sense of perspective.
It does, and you have this amazing sense of perspective out there on the ocean, with this kind of incredible kind of world, and you have to, that stays with you, and also this, 251 women have rode an ocean. It's an incredibly small amount of women, and that is just that sense of pride will just always be with me. No one will ever take that achievement away from me.
Deservedly so. It's an incredible achievement, as you say. And I think that leads me to a few questions to finish off. Would you do it again? And also, if not, what's next to fill this void?
It's tricky, really tricky. Would I do it again? Someone asked me as soon as I got off the boat. I think I said no right there and then. I think I wouldn't do it again in the same format.
Sure.
But I think if the same situation arose again, so someone gave me a last minute invitation to jump in the boat, perhaps to row across the Pacific.
Yeah, mix it up a bit.
Yeah. Then I think it would be really hard to say no.
No, that makes sense. And do you have anything that you're now planning towards eventually? You're going to take a bit of time out? I'm still rowing. Well, I will be rowing again, so I'll kind of carry on with masters rowing, which is incredibly competitive actually. I mean, you turn up on races and you're racing against Olympians. In terms of big challenges, I did marathons before and I want to carry on with them, but I think, really rowing the Atlantic, you've kind of gone, I've gone from 0 to 120 miles an hour going from marathons to rowing the Atlantic. It is, and everyone said this afterwards, it's quite hard to find something that matches that. Sure.
Whether it's climbing mountains or, going to North Pole or
take some time out to assess and see what opportunity presents.
But I do like being on the water.
Okay.
And so something will draw me back to not just rivers, but back to the ocean.
Sounds good. And then I'd say the last bit, put you on the spot a little bit, what would be a takeaway message? You mentioned about how to change your perspective. If you were to say one thing to everyone listening, what would be a kind of takeaway message from your experience rowing the Atlantic?
Well, it's funny actually that it might not be the message that people expect, but there was such an amazing sense of camaraderie with all the crew members, both from when we were in La Gomera to kind of communicating with people on the boat, to the little acts that other people did on the boat to make you feel better. And it really made me think that it's not just, being kind is a bit of a slogan for these days, but it doesn't really mean anything. You have to do things, you have to go out of your way to help other people, and doing those little random acts of kindness every day were incredibly important to me, and they're incredibly important to people in the crew. And that's another of my kind of boat resolutions that I've taken with me, is to try and make sure that I do something every day to try and make somebody else's life better. People close to me sacrificed a lot in order for me to be able to go across the ocean, and so now I feel like it's my turn to really give something back to them and other people around me. I think
that's a great message. We work as a team and try and do something kind and helpful for others each day to make things a little bit better in a healthier place. So cool. Well, thank you for coming in. Congratulations again on your achievement. It is one of a kind almost. So well done on that. And thank you for the interview and all the best going forward.
Thanks, Fraser.